Good afternoon, gentlemen. My name is Artie Keenan. Welcome to the Woodcraft hand tool setup demo. First thing I'm going to talk about is a little bit of the history of the hand plane. And it probably goes back at least to the Egyptians. I think they have pictures of hieroglyphics or whatever they call it, you know, of hand plane craftsmen working. And what they would have had is something like this. They would have had a piece of wood with a fixed blade somehow wedged into it. However they did it. This is a Krenov style plane. I'm sure most of you have heard of it. It's 3 or 4 pieces of wood all glued together, but most of the wooden planes that people used through the centuries were hogged out of one piece of wood. You know, most of the ones are coffin planes. When I speak of a hand plane, generally I'm speaking of a number 4, because that's the bench plane that's in my hand most often. They go up. Let's stay on the wooden ones, and then I'll get to that. You know, the coffin planes they weren't this long, and they were a little wider, and kind of a perfect rectangle to look at. You've probably seen them if any of you go to the tool sales, the pickup truck sales up in New Hampshire or something. You know, they're a dime a dozen up there. You know, and you can get some pretty nice ones, and they still work. You know, the shop I was in, we used it not all the time, but we would break it out once in a while, and that was up until probably 1865, somewhere around the Civil War. Leonard Bailey came up with this design here, and he worked in Boston, and he had his own company. He was manufacturing these things. Then he went partners with Stanley, and I think Stanley either bought him out or they had a business disagreement. I forget what happened, but at any rate, Stanley took over the manufacturer, and you all know what Stanley did as a business. And all of the manufacturers these days are using a Bailey style plane when they manufacture hand planes, except Lee Valley, at least as far as I know. You know, the Lee Nielsen's, this is a Wood River, the Wood Rivers, Clifton makes one. There's a number of not a lot of manufacturers that make hand planes, but they all use to my knowledge, they all use the Bailey style plane. And this has become kind of the norm. And they're good planes. Everyone uses them, like I said. I'm going to kind of go over, if you're looking to either get into it or you're not familiar with how you clean up an old plane. You know, the way to get into it from the beginning, the cheapest way is to buy an old one or make your own. You're probably not going to save any money either way this way, because there's a lot of time involved in both of them, whether you're cleaning up an old one or if you're making your new one. But if you're going to buy a new one, the way to go is to get the Wood River or the Lee Nielsen or the Lee Valley in my book. These Wood Rivers are cheaper, and they're good planes. The guy that teaches here all the time, Mike McGrath, he uses them. He's recommended them to me, and if he says they're good, then I've been using the Stanley. This is my user. So I've been on this for so long that I'm not going back. This is going to die with me, so. But these are good planes. Now, this is, like I said, this is my daily user. And you can see it's all nice and shiny and pretty. I made it look nice, you know, but it looked like that when I got it, all right? So depending on how much sweat equity you want to put into something, this is what you can get, all right? When I get the plane, I break it down. We'll talk about the sole. Everybody, you see all the chatter on all the woodworking forums and everything is to check the sole, you know. You can put a straight edge on it, put it up to the light. I have a little discrepancy in the front at the toe, and this has a little bit of a camber to it. but I'm not worried about it. If you're the kind of guy that puts a feeler gauge under a straight edge looking for perfection, you're probably not going to find it even if you bought a brand new one. So I don't know how fussy you want to be. I don't care if you want to flatten it out perfect. The way to do it is a granite plate or a piece of float glass, your table saw, your jointer, whatever you got, and go through the grits. I'm not going to do it today because we don't have time. It probably took me minimum a day to do this, and it was probably closer to 2 days from start to finish. And once I started putting finish on the wood, then I had to wait a few days while it dried and everything. But you know, it is a process. But you flatten the sole if you want. If I was going to do this, I would shine it up on a flat plate. Now, I'm not looking to get it good and flat perfect, but as long as I'm going to clean it up, I might as well make sure it's flat. You can, if you want, you can check and see if the side is square to the sole, if you're going to use it for a shooting plane, you know, on its side. A lot of guys will do that. And we can talk about that because there's a couple of considerations later on. So what I would do is I get everything cleaned up. I think I took this up to 600 grit. It has some rust spots on it now because it's been down my cellar being used. You know, it probably could use a little cleaning up, but I haven't got to it in a while. I probably took it up to 600. First thing I would do with this is probably throw it in a pot of soapy water with a toothbrush or a soft brass brush or something and clean everything up, you know, maybe get rid of some of this rust. Some guys will, this black paint that you see is called Japanning. Some guys will paint it black again. I kind of leave the old Japanning alone. That's just personal preference, whatever you want. I'm not sure what kind of finish they put on them in the old days. Japanning comes from a technique that was invented over in Asia, probably thousands of years ago. I don't know, but it's a pretty tough, durable, shiny finish that comes out black. And so that's, I think, why they call it Japanning. But I would just clean it up so that it's nice and clean and everything, and I'm shined it up, got everything ready to go. I take all of my parts, I'll put this on a wire wheel, all my screws, put them on a wire wheel, get them all cleaned up. Something like the lever cap, I would probably, I don't want to put that on a wire wheel. That tends to leave some heavy scratches. So I'll probably clean that up with some wet, dry sandpaper. The frog. Yeah, I should go over the nomenclature is what I should do. So this is the body, the sole, the side. This is the bed, the frog. This is the frog. Sits on the bed assembly, all right? The frog has a blade, what do they call this? Adjustment screw, I think is what they call it. It also has this yoke that fits over this screw here, and that's how, when I put it together, you'll see I can turn the screw in and out. That'll pull the frog back and forth to close or open. This is called the throat, this opening here. That'll close or open your throat. This is called the plain blade adjustment lever, okay? If you buy an old one, a thing to look for is this little round nib here, or whatever you want to call it. You want to make sure that is attached pretty good. You know, I've seen a lot of them where they're loose, and it's hard to peen that over again, because you know you have to get it on an anvil or something. And I just would stay away from it. There are a lot of guys up on those tool sales that will sell you a new frog that will fit your plane. You can go that way, but it's probably just as easy to find an old Stanley that has all parts are good. But that is one thing I would look for. When you're cleaning up this stuff, anywhere that isn't japanned has to be fairly shiny and flat and, you know, ready to go. You know, both this part here that sits in here on this bed here. So all of this stuff has to be, this is kind of hard to get at. You know, I'll put sandpaper on a piece of wood or something and clean it up like that, whatever. I have heard of guys that'll take engine or some kind of grinding compound they use in cars or something and put it in there and run them back and forth. I've never tried it. It sounds like it'd be kind of tough to do, but you know, whatever you do, you got to get that stuff pretty clean. Otherwise, you're liable to get chatter with the frog and the bed not being, you know, or maybe it'll shift on you or something. I mean, you can crank down the screws, but you don't want to be forcing things either with these things. So we get the frog. This little yoke here that fits over your adjustment knob, that's attached to this little nib here that goes into the back of the chip breaker, and that's going to move the blade back and forth, all right? And that's, I think, all the parts on the frog. So I got my frog. Now I have my blade assembly. I have a blade, and I have a chip breaker. They go together like this. These are beveled down planes. So when I put it together, I'm going to want my bevel down when it goes into the plane again, all right? This is the lever cap. That's right there. That holds everything together. This is the tote or the handle, whatever you want to call it. Another reason I like the old Stanleys, they made them out of Brazilian rosewood. One of the prettiest woods going. You can't even get it today. So if you buy one prior to 1930 or something like that, I don't know when they stopped using it, but most of them are Brazilian rosewood. That's another thing. If you are going to buy an older Stanley, I wouldn't buy anything after World War II, maybe. You know, prior to that, that was their sweet spot. From like 1880 or so to 1945, 50, something like that. They go by, you guys heard of the plane type study? You've never heard of Stanley, what's his name? Patrick Leach. Patrick Leach is a tool dealer, and years ago he did a study of these planes. And he published what he called a plane type study. So you could take, he has a, not a spreadsheet, but you know, you can go, is it this? Yes, go over there. Is it no? You go down. Well, what do you call that? I forget. Yeah, anyway, you can hold your plane, bring that up on the web or print it out or something and say, does it have a raised bed under the knob? Yes, okay, go over there. Does it have dates on the bed? Yes, all right, go down there. And you can figure out when your plane was made. This one is a Type 11, probably 1900 to 1910, something like that. This is the era before that, because this says patented March of 1902, and this is 1910. So this was just before that, and they go back from there. There isn't much difference after, I think, the Type 6 or 7, 6 to 8 maybe. Prior to that, they didn't have the frog adjustment screw. They didn't have the lever, the plane, what's this called? Come on, guys. What is it? It's not the blade adjustment. Anyway, the hell is this called? Lateral the lateral adjustment lever, okay? They didn't have that. They didn't have this. I think that's it. So it was just the fixed blade. You had to tap it with a hammer or something if you wanted to move your blade back and forth. It had a flatter bed. I know that. And I think this might have been flat at a 45 too. They're all good, like I said, up until about 1950 or so. These have a brass screw head on the top. Comes off of the, that just comes like that. I'll clean it. I won't put the brass on a wire wheel. I'll probably clean that up with sandpaper or something. If you want, you can use paint thinner and stuff and that, but I just, I'll use like WD-40 or something, because everything is going to have to be lubricated again too when you put it back together, some kind of light machine oil or something. And if you want to really get insane, you can shine everything up, you would too. You can do your thing with that. This looks like it has a dead guy's name on it. A lot of tools, that's why people buy them. They like to see that dead guy, he handled this, and he punched it out. I don't know if you guys can see that, yeah. And it also has a little crack in it. So you want to look for things like that. Now, don't worry, that can be a dickering item that you can go over the dealer with. Oh, that's got a crack. It's probably not going to break or anything, but if it does, I got a nice number 7 at home that a guy broke on me. He dropped it, and this thing broke right in half. And I just figured out, a couple of jigs that would hold it perfect and everything. I put a clamp on it, and I glued it back together, and I sanded it up and shined it again, and I've been using it ever since. So don't be too afraid if you do break it or something like that. They glue right back together again, So now you got everything all cleaned up and nice and shiny and everything, and you're ready to go. So you've got to put it back together. All right? So I'm thinking first we'll put the knob. This is called the knob, by the way. The tote, the knob, the tote and handle and the knob. Yeah. So we'll put this back on here. Make sure you get a screwdriver that fits the slot pretty good. You don't want to be dinging these things up, And as long as I'm on that, a lot of guys will take the blade adjustment assembly apart with the end of their lever cap like that. And you'll see many of these with a chip in the end. So you want to use a good screwdriver. I made this one out of an old combination square blade, That way it'll fit the slot right. And they sell them, Wood River sells them. You can find these, and you should have a good screwdriver, or you can buy an old Craftsman or something, but don't be dinging up your screws. Put the tote on first. And these just screw right down. And you crank it down pretty good, because you don't want that moving on you, Then we can put the frog on. And like I say, it has to fit that yoke, this yoke right here, has to fit that slot there, okay? And there it is. That'll go on like that. These two little screws here, a little bit of a pain in the neck. And as long as we're on this, I'm going to talk a little bit about one difference in these Bailey Styles hand planes. I forget when it showed up, but they came up with a bedrock invention, they called it. And if you are familiar with the hand planes, you've seen the bedrock. Most of them look like this. They have this flat on the side as opposed to the curve. Some of the bedrocks do have a curve, so don't be fooled. You don't have to have that flat to get a bedrock. The thing that sets apart a bedrock from just a regular one is the way that the frog is adjusted back and forth. On the older ones, you have to take apart the lever cap and the blade adjustment, a blade assembly, take it off, loosen these two screws up, and then you can throw your screwdriver in there and bring the frog back and forth. On the bedrocks, these two screws here in the back, and if you loosen those two screws, that'll loosen these two rods that are holding the frog down, and then you can use your middle screw to bring the frog back and forth, right? So the advantage to the bedrock is that you don't have to take this off to get the job done, your blade assembly. You can just go to work while your plane is still, and if you have to loosen up this, you saw what kind of trouble I had getting that up. You don't need a screwdriver, just take, while it's off, loosen it up a little by hand, and I'll just put it on until I like the pressure it's giving me. And that's still a little, that's how I like it, like that. It doesn't have to be insane. But there's the advantage. See, now this is all together. I can just loosen those two up, bring my frog where I want it, and I'm back to work, okay? So that's the advantage to that. So now we can put this in. Everything's all cleaned up. Put a couple of drops of oil on all these screws. I'm going to put my blade together, and as long as we're this far, now I'm going to talk a little bit about sharpening your blade. And this gets us to whether or not you're going to use it for a shooting plane, all right? And if you should be worried about this thing being square here. I have a different plane that I use for shooting. And the reason is, when I use my bench plane, my blade will have a little camber on it, on the top. And the reason I do that is, if I'm surfacing a board, if I'm running my plane across the surface, if it's flat across, I'm going to be leaving little ridges everywhere, all right? If I put a little camber in it, I'm not going to have those ridges. I'll have little tiny scallops all across the surface. You can either live with those. I have a couple of pieces of furniture that's how I wanted the surface to look. You know, you can't see it. You can kind of feel it if you run your hand across it. In a raking light sometimes, if I'm looking at it from over there, I can spot it. But I like the way it looks, is why I did it. If you don't like the way it looks, you know, the general way the old timers did it when they were making furniture is after the number 4, they would use a cabinet scraper. Then they would use a card scraper. And then they're either done, or that maybe some 400 or 200, 300, whatever, sandpaper, and then put the finish on. So if you're going to use it for a shooting plane, you're going to have to grind the square across. Because if you think about it, if this has a camber on it and I'm shooting, if I'm going to look for a square end on that rail or whatever I'm shooting, if it has a camber on it, that thing's going to have a slight angle. So the joinery ain't going to be perfect, you know. So that's why I have 2 planes, one for shooting and one for the bench. So I'm going to go over to the grinder now, and I'm going to grind a little camber on this, hopefully real quick. And what I'll do is, I want that pretty square across. That lateral adjustment mechanism will take care of a little bit. If you're out of square, a little bit, it'll take care of it somewhat. But if it's at an angle, you kind of you're gonna have to grind again, you know. All right. You guys can come over and watch this if you want. I've already set this up. Everybody talks about the angle of the blade, you know, what kind of angle you want. Generally speaking, it's from 25 to 30 degrees. The guy that I worked with used to say that you want this bevel to be twice as long as the thickness of the blade, is how he did it. I kind of just eyeball it. Most of them, if you get a brand new blade, you know, I put a brand new blade in mine. That's the other thing. If you're going to buy a new, an old Stanley, you want to buy a new blade. These, you can see, this used to be about this long from the bottom of this hole to the end of the blade. So whoever owned this, that dead guy there, he used it quite a bit, you know. So you would almost have to buy a new blade with that plane, because. Pardon?
What blade company did you go with?
Well, mine's a Hawk blade. I bought that about 20 years ago. He's out of business, but Lee Valley bought his business, and I think they still sell them. Yeah. A lot of tool companies sell them these days. Okay. They're probably all good. Wood River, so you can buy it here from Wood River. I'm sure they're fine blades. What it is the thickness. You can get into all kinds of arguments about PVM steel and this steel and that steel. I'm not a metallurgist. I have no idea what is, you know, I'm not even that cognizant about this O2 steel and the A2 or whatever it is. I mean, everything I buy, if it needs sharpening, I sharpen it. You know. The way I set it up is I'll turn the grinder on and I'll put that, and in a couple of spots, I'll just tap it. And you can't really see it now, but the first time I tapped it, I had a grind at the bottom, but nothing at the toe. And then I adjusted it too much. I got it at the toe, not the heel. I finally got it to where I'm right in the middle. I'm going to use this angle is what I'm getting at. So I got it right in the middle, and now I'll put my grind on it. I'll use my finger for a fence, and I'm just going to keep it up there. I'll go right back and forth. Right across it. Just going to check myself here. All right, that's going to be good enough for this. So this is not perfect. Why don't you guys hand this around and hold it up to the light like that. You can see I went off on the right-hand side. There's a little space, and it's not perfectly square. But I'm going to live with it for today. If I was down my shop, I'd fix it perfect, all right? But this is kind of what I'm looking for there, you know? So off the grinder, now the big thing we have to do, the back of these have to be flat, whether it's a plain blade or a chisel. You have to start, if that thing has any kind of belly in it or convex, and then you sharpen the bevel, you're going to have a distorted bevel. You know, it'll either fall off on either ends or the belly, you know, it just doesn't work. Now, Mike uses Windex. I forget why he said it. I just use water, but because he left me some Windex, I'm going to use Windex. And flattening the back of a blade, if you have, when I was first starting out and buying old chisels, I spent days trying to flatten chisels that were pretty bad, you know. If you get a new blade from one of the manufacturers, it should be pretty flat. And if it isn't, I'd bring it back to Woodcraft, or I'd send it back to where you go. You can spend a few days doing it. I mean, it's up to you. But nowadays, they come from the factory pretty flat, you know. And again, we're not going to get too fussy for this particular demo. You know, when you're doing it for real, it's got to be perfect. But for this, we're just going to play around. And you saw with the little amount that I just did, the way you can tell if it's flat is you can look at all, pass that around, you can look at all the scratches on the back of that blade, and if they go all the way across, then you're flat. And you only have to do about a ½ an inch or so, because as I'm sharpening my blade, every time I sharpen it, I do the back. So I'll walk that flat spot back as I'm doing it throughout the life of the blade. So you don't have to worry about it that much, but you do have to get it flat the first time. I think this is probably 1,000. I can't see. That's what I was looking for. I think this is 1,000. Yeah, there it is, 1,200. So I'm right around there, yeah. And you can get them, I think, as low as 200. And that's pretty coarse. But I think I start with 1,000 all the time now. I got a set of 4. I think I go from 1 to 3 to 6 to 10 is what I'm doing these days. I've gone through a number of stones. I started with the Kings. We sell them here. They're good stones. I mean, I used them for years, and I never even, I mean, you can't even tell there's, and you know about flattening stones, right? All you guys, you know all that, right? It has to be flat. So I flatten them a number of times, but you hardly take anything out of it. So they last a long time, you know. I went to King's, then I went to Norton. Then a friend of mine sold me a set of Sharptons, you know, the Cadillacs. For some reason, I didn't like them, and he didn't either, but I'm not going to say anything bad about Sharptons. They're great stones. I mean, there's too many people using them and liking them, so there must be something there. But now, a friend of mine gave me a 10,000 grit Ohisha that Lee Nielsen was selling. And I bought a set of them, and that's probably going to do it because I'm not working that much in the shop as I used to, so I'll probably ride that one out into the sunset, you know. But what I'm getting at is any set of stones that's half decent is going to work for you, you know. So if you don't have a lot of money, don't be worrying about it. Now we have to do the bevel. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do one side, middle, you know, I might be able to take a little bit of that outer square out on the stone, you know, so I'm going to kind of concentrate. And the reason I use the bench grinder, it puts what they call a hollow grind on it, you know, on the blade. So now when I put it on my stone, I'm on the heel, I can feel it rocking back and forth. Now I know I'm flat, all right? That's the advantage to the bench grinder. You know, the guys at Lee Nielsen use sandpaper on a granite plate, and they use their jig. And they used to set up the dog and pony show at the shop I was in once a year. And I don't know if you guys know who Phil Lowe is. I used to work with Phil Lowe, and they would fight about which way was the best. But they both got a perfect edge, so who gives a shit, right? Yeah. So pick your poison is all I'm saying. So I'm going to concentrate on that corner there. And I have a little block of wood at home that captures the stone. and it has nails on the bottom of it sticking out a 16th, and I just snap it into the bench so that this doesn't happen. And you don't have to do a lot. I'm going to do about 5 passes in each spot. Let's see what that looks like. Looks like I got to get a little bit more on right here. That'll do it, I think. So you can see the toe and heel have shiny spots on it, right? And that's all you need. You don't have to get a lot. Okay?
How about diamond
Yep.
stones?
Yep. Yep, you can definitely use those. The thing with those is you don't have to flatten them. Yeah, so if you want to go with those, yeah. You know, you can use sandpaper too. The reason I argue against that is because you got to keep buying it. Yeah. You buy a set of stones, you buy them once. But the diamond ones definitely work. I know guys that use them. You know, they'll have 3 of them set up, boom, 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 and they're done. You know, and some guys will use them dry. Some guys will use water. The guy I know that uses them dry, he sharpens and then he brushes it off with a cloth or something. So yeah, you can definitely use diamonds. Yeah. So I got that's a 1,000, and I'm going to flatten the back again. This is 8,000. All right. Again, at home, I go up to 3 before I got to the 6 or the 8. I like to step it up a little, you know, a little at a time. All right, I'm kind of getting there. We're not going to try and do it perfect, but you can see how the shinier spots are the 8,000. And if I was doing it for real, that whole thing would be mirror finish before I would consider it done. And that's what I would do from the beginning, is if you buy a new blade from the factory, I'd get it mirror finish before I started on the bevel, you know.
If you buy a new blade,
Yeah.
what grade would you start?
I'd probably start with the 10,000 and see if that does it.
Yeah.
You know, if you can get your shine right across the whole thing, then you know it was flat.
Sure.
So all you're doing is shining it. Yeah, that's how I'd approach that one, yeah. You might have to step it down a little, but,
Sure.
you know. And if it was, you know, if I had it mostly shiny, there was maybe a little missing on either edge, I'd probably live with it. Because you got that camber on your blade anyway, so you're not going to be using that part of it, you know. I mean, when I haven't got a, what's that, a UBN wheel? Is that what they call them, Ed? Those CBN wheel, you know, they don't heat up like the regular wheels on your grinder. I don't have one.
I used to have one of those.
Yeah.
They're fantastic.
But sometimes I'll get a little, I take the temper out, you know, and I just live with it till I grind it off again. That's, you know, I don't know. I'm not as fussy as some guys are, you know. So let's just see if we can put a half decent edge on this real quick. I'm just taking that little burr off before I go any further. All right. So that don't look that bad. I think it's going to work when we put it back together again.
So would you use your whetstone for like chisels and
Yep.
all that? Okay.
Yep.
You just
That's
use
exactly, yeah.
I use any flat blade. I use water stones. If I'm sharpening my turning tools or my carving tools, I use oil stones. And the only reason for that is the oil stones don't wear out as quick as the water stones. And all my oil stones have a little dish in them, but I don't care because I'm sharpening a curved blade anyway. So I just have 2 sets of stones, you know. And if I'm doing bowl work, you know, if I'm doing spindle work, like furniture legs or something, I'll grind the shape I want. But then I'll also go to my stones and put a nice mirror finish on that kind of work. But if I'm doing bowls, I go right from the I use a big bowl gouge, and I go right off the grinder, you know, like most people do. So now we got to put this back together again, right? So now I just sharpen my blade, right? You put it over the big hole there, and then put the blade beyond the chip breaker, and then bring it back. That way you're not going to just damage your the blade, I mean the edge that you just took time to sharpen. And I'm going to bring it back to within about, I don't know, maybe a 16th or so, or a 32nd. Again, not that fussy. We'll call it just between a 16th and a 32nd. And back to the screwdriver that fits. Crank that down. And here's a very, very important point. Can't emphasize it enough. When I put this together, I have to look up and make sure there's no light between that chip breaker and the blade. And we got lucky that doesn't have a light. Because what happens is, as soon as you start working with that plane, little pieces of wood are going to get stuck between the chip breaker and the blade, and it ain't going to work anymore. And I'll bet there's a million people around the world that stopped using hand tools just because of that one problem. You know, you have to get that so it doesn't have any space. And if it did, what I do is I'll show you when I get the thing back. Actually, I can show you, make believe this is the chip breaker. I'll just put a hand file on the bench, right? Thank you. And I run it like that, back and forth, until I get a shiny spot right across there. And then I can put it back together and check it again, and I'm going to be sure that there isn't any space there. So that's how to fix that problem. And I also, I'll put my chip breaker on my stones and polish it up real good. Both the top here and underneath where it's touching the back of the blade. That just makes everything run a little smoother when you're planing. Okay, so everything's put together again. This goes in, beveled down like I said. Comes in like that. Get that little nib there. And I think what we have to do, it's not sitting perfectly flat. So I'm just going to move this back a little. So I loosen those two up. Now I can bring the frog back a little. Crank it back down. Not quite. I'm just going to make sure what I'm hitting here. one more time, and then we'll give up. I think I went the wrong way. Let's try it like that. That's a little better. We'll live with it. Put the lever cap back on. Gonna have to crank that down. I can tell just by looking at it. Again, a little oil on it before you do this. There you go. Now, I'll put a piece of white paper here, sight down my sole. That blade's sticking way out, so I'm going to bring it back. I got everything back together. I'm about ready to go to work. What do I want to do now? What I do is I got this little piece of wood. There's my grain direction, all right? Put that in my vise. And I'm going to see if I can get a shaving. No, that's too much. And here's what I do too, is a piece of paraffin wax. That'll keep things moving a little better. This is just canning wax from Stop and Shop. All right, so with that, what I'm getting at is with this crappy old plane that we just spent less than an hour playing around with, I can make shavings. So if you want to buy one and just go to work, you can. But if you want to do this, you're going to be in better shape. You know, the reason I didn't take this one apart is because I kind of got it set up yesterday. And I don't know where that rust spot came from. I wasn't there yesterday, but whatever. And listen, we'll see if we can get this going a little bit better. Now I got a heavier shaving on my left side. So I push it over just to here. See, I run my plane left and right till I get the same kind of shaving on both sides. And that should be what I'm looking for. Now I'm going to see if I can get one flat shaving the length of that piece of stock. And that's kind of what you're looking for. This was shaving a little better yesterday. It seems a little flaky today. Let me see if I can get one more here. Whoops. And that's a little better. So this is what you're looking for. This piece is the same thickness on both sides. And it's as wide as the wood that I took it off of. So you can see. And the reason I can do that is because of that camber on the blade. And the advantage besides the flat surface that we talked about earlier is if you're joining, you know, you're gluing up some edge work to make a tabletop or something, and you put your square on those edges, and it's off a little. If you have a square blade in your plane, then you have to ride that edge to bring it down square. I can put my blade flat on it, and depending which side has the arris, I can bring the plane over to the arris, take it off while my plane sole is flat on the stock, and I have more control. So that's one. There's two reasons that I put the camber on the blade, and those are the two that we're talking about. All right?
So the camphor that you put on the blade, you did it.
Yeah, I did that on the grinder.
Say you don't have a grinder.
So I have a grinder, yeah. I don't have a CBN wheel.
No, I don't have a grinder.
You don't have a grinder, you can, well, you're going to have to either use a flat grind on your bevel. And you can put a tiny camber on your blade with a stone, or what you can do is just grind a little round on either edge of your blade. Get a little diamond thing on the wall back there. You can take it off with that, because you're not going to be able to use a file or something because it's hardened steel. But that's one way to handle it. And if you're going to be using a flat grind, maybe you should be using a jig. It'll probably make it go quicker, because that thing's going to be flat all the time. It takes a little, when I first started, I used to be a carpenter years ago. So all my chisels, I didn't use a grinder. And it's a little tricky to hold them things flat on the stone, But when I learned the hollow grind, I never looked back. I kind of prefer that, Yeah, okay? Anything else? All right, that's all I got then. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Okay? All right.